We're still on The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, and last night I kind of ended at a weird spot, but because I knew what was going to come after, so I didn't want to ruin it. So we continue. Mama looked at Pecula. You too, she said, child of mine or not. She grabbed Pecula and spun her around. The safety pin snapped open and on the end of the napkin, and Mama saw it fall from under her dress. The switch hovered in the air while Mama blinked. What the devil is going on here? Frida was sobbing. I, next in line, began to explain. She was bleeding. We was just trying to stop the bleeding. Mama looked at Frida for verification. Frida nodded. She's menstruating. We was just helping. Mama released Pecola and stood looking at her. Then she pulled both of them towards her, their heads against her stomach. Her eyes were sorry. All right, all right. Now, stop crying. I didn't know. Come on now, get on in the house. Go home, Rosemary. The show is over. We trooped in, Frida sobbing quietly, Pecola carrying a white tail, me carrying the little girl gone to woman pants. Mama led us to the bathroom. She prodded Pecola inside and, taking the underwear from me, told us to stay out. We could hear water running into the bathtub. You think she gonna drown her? Oh, Claudia, you're so dumb. She's just going to wash her clothes and all. Should we beat up Rosemary? No, leave her alone. The water gushed, and over its gushing, we could hear the music of my mother's laughter. That night in bed, the three of us lay still. We were full of awe and respect for Pecola. Lying next to a real person who was really ministrating was somehow sacred. She was different from us now, grown up like. She herself felt the distance, but refused to lord it over us. After a long while, she spoke very softly. Is it true that I can have a baby now? Sure. Frida drowsily. Sure you can. But how? Her voice was hollow with wonder. Oh, said Frida, somebody has to love you. Oh. There was a long pause in which Pecula and I thought this over. It would involve, I suppose, my man, who, before leaving me, would love me. But there weren't any babies in the songs my mother sang. Maybe that's why the women were sad. The men left before they could make the baby. Then Pecola asked a question that had never entered my mind. How do you do that? I mean, how do you get somebody to love you? But Frida was asleep, and I didn't know. Here is the house. It is green and white and has a red door. It is very pretty, very pretty, very pretty, very pretty. There's an abandoned store on the southeast corner of Broadway and 35th Street in Lorain, Ohio. It does not recede into its background of leaden sky, nor harmonize with the gray frame houses and black telephone poles around it. Rather, it foists itself on the eye of the passerby in a manner that is both irritating and melancholy. Visitors who drive to this tiny town wonder why it has not been torn down, while pedestrians, who are residents of the neighborhood, simply look away when they pass it by. At one time, when the building housed a pizza parlor, people saw only slow-footed teenage boys huddled about the corner. These young boys met there to feel their groins, smoke cigarettes, and plan mild outrages. The smoke from the cigarettes they inhaled deeply, forcing it to fill their lungs, their hearts, their thighs, and keep at bay the shiveriness, the energy of their youth. They moved slowly, laughed slowly, but flicked the ashes from their cigarettes too quickly too often, and exposed themselves to those who were interested, as novices to the habit. But long before the sound of their lowing and the sight of their preening, the building was leased to a Hungarian baker, modestly famous for his brioche and poppy seed rolls. Earlier than that, there was a real estate office there, and even before that, some gypsies used it as a base for operations. The gypsy family gave the large plate glass window as much distinction and character as it ever had. The girls of the family took turns sitting between the yards of velvet drapery and oriental rugs hanging at the windows. They looked out and occasionally smiled or winked or beckoned, only occasionally. Mostly they looked, their elaborate dresses long sleeved and long skirted, hiding the nakedness that stood in their eyes. So fluid has the population of that area been that probably no one remembers longer ago, before the time of the gypsies and the time of the teenagers, when the breedloves lived there, nestled together in the storefront, festering together in the debris of a realtor's whim. They slipped in and out of the box of peeling gray, making no stir in the neighborhood, no sound in the labor force, and no wave in the mayor's office. Each member of the family in his own cell of consciousness, each making his own patchwork quilt of reality, collecting fragments of experience here, pieces of information there. From the tiny impressions gleaned from one another, they created a sense of belonging and tried to make do with the way they found each other. The plan of the living quarters was as unimaginative as a first-generation Greek landlord would contrive it to be. The large store area was partitioned into 2 rooms by beaver board planks that did not reach to the ceiling. There was a living room, which the family called the front room, and the bedroom where all the living was done. In the front room were 2 sofas, an upright piano, and a tiny artificial Christmas tree, which had been there decorated and dusted for 2 years. The bedroom had 3 beds, a narrow iron bed for Sammy, 14 years old, another for Pecola, 11 years old, and a double bed for Charlie and Mrs. Breedlove. In the center of the bedroom, for the even distribution of heat, stood a coal stove. Trunks, chairs, a small end table, and a cardboard wardrobe closet were placed around the walls. The kitchen was in the back of this apartment, a separate room. There were no bath facilities, only a toilet bowl, inaccessible to the eye, if not the ear, for the tenants. There is nothing more to say about the furnishings. They were anything but describable, having been conceived, manufactured, shipped, and sold in various states of thoughtlessness, greed, and indifference. The furniture had aged without ever becoming familiar. People had owned it, but never known it. No one had lost a penny or a brooch under the cushions of either sofa and remembered the place and time of the loss or the finding. No one had clucked and said, "But I had just a minute ago, I was sitting right there talking to," or "Here it is. It must have slipped down while I was feeding the baby." No one had given birth in one of the beds or remembered with fondness the peeled paint places, because that's what the baby, when he learned to pull himself up, used to pick loose. No thrifty child had tucked a wad of gum under the table. No happy drunk, a friend of the family with a fat neck, unmarried, but God, how he eats, had sat at the piano and played "You Are My Sunshine." No young girl had stared at the tiny Christmas tree and remembered when she had decorated it, or wondered if that blue ball was going to hold, or if he would ever come back to see it. There were no memories among those pieces, certainly no memories to be cherished. Occasionally, an item provoked a physical reaction, an increase of acid irritation in the upper intestinal tract, a light flush of perspiration at the back of the neck as circumstances surrounding the piece of furniture were recalled. The sofa, for example, it had been purchased new, but the fabric had split straight across the back at the time it was delivered. The store would not take responsibility. "Look a here, buddy. It was okay when I put it on the truck. The store don't do nothing, don't do anything about it once it's on the truck." Listerine and Lucky Strike breath. "But I don't want no tour couch if it is bought new." Pleading eyes and tightened testicles. "Tough shit, buddy. You're tough shit." You could hate a sofa, of course. That is, if you could hate a sofa. But it didn't matter. You still had to get together $4.80 a month if you had to pay $4.80 a month for a sofa that started off split, no good, and humiliating. You couldn't take any joy in owning it. And the joylessness stank, pervaded everything. The stink of it kept you from painting the beaver board walls, from getting a matching piece of material for the chair, even from sewing up the split, which became a gash, which became a gaping chasm that exposed the cheap frame and cheap upholstery. It withheld the refreshment in a sleep slept on it. It imposed a furtiveness on the loving done on it. Like a sore tooth that is not content to throb in isolation, but must diffuse its own pain to other parts of the body, making breathing difficult. Vision limited, nerves unsettled, so a hated piece of furniture produces a fretful malaise that asserts itself throughout the house and limits the delight of things not related to it. The only living thing in the Breedlove's house was the coal stove, which lived independently of everything and everyone, its fire being out, banked, or up at its own discretion, in spite of the fact that the family fed it and knew all the details of its regimen. Sprinkle, do not dump, not too much. The fire seemed to live, go down, or die according to its own schemata. In the morning, however, it always saw fit to die.